This is Life Lessons Lounge, and I'm Igina Gerazi. Here, we explore diverse life stories and the wisdom they hold. Let's delve into the stories that shape us, teach us, and connect us all. Welcome to the second season of the Life Lessons Lounge podcast. We kick off this season with the incredible Anita Sommers, who is a systemic family therapist and youngest of 13 siblings, to explore how our childhoods, family systems, and personal healing journeys shape who we become. From growing up in organized chaos to realizing at only 8 years old that she could understand people deeply. We talk trauma, emotional regulation, parenting, and what it really means to be seen and loved in relationships. And Anita shares how moving from the US to the UK and now Portugal helped her redefine belonging and purpose. Tune in into this heartwarming episode. Welcome, Anita. I'm so excited that you're here. Thank you for being here.
Thank you. Thanks for this opportunity. I'm excited about having a chat with you.
Yes, me too. I know you have a lovely, juicy life in a way. I would love to hear what events and circumstances have shaped your life. What are the main events?
Well, I think the biggest impact, like so many people, was my childhood. But I feel like I had kind of a unique childhood that really shaped me, for good or bad. I'm the youngest of 13 children. My parents had 13 children in 14 years. Um, And I was raised by a lot of my older siblings, my older sisters, who were amazing and continue to be amazing women who do crazy things like start marathons in their 60s and get a PhD in their 60s. And they were really good at being older sisters and so they had a big shape of my life, you know. But also although it was kind of a wacky childhood and there was, in some ways, it was hard to get your needs met given all the, of the children. And sometimes because I had older sisters doing a lot of the caregiving, they were teenagers. So they did the best they could, but they were quite young. Some were like 12. But I think we did have certain things were super important. One, I came from a Catholic background, but, which came with its own sort of baggage, but it also came with, we had a really sense of changing the world and making the world better. And too much is, we were quite blessed. And the idea of too much is given, much is expected was definitely, and we did some really interesting things. My dad was a huge character in our life. And in one level, he was intense and was both, but he gave, like, I would say the things I value most came from him, and the things I don't like so much came from him. So he had sort of, his moods were a little bit up and down, and there was some sense of walking on eggshells. But he also really thought outside the box, and he really wanted us to be our own, like, thinkers. Like, we would have family meetings in which we would discuss the John F. Kennedy assassination and have opinions, or things about human nature. And I think I became a therapist. One of our family meetings, this is one of my critical moments that led me to be a therapist. I felt as a youngest, I never felt as smart. My siblings were quite smart and intellectual and readers, and I always felt a little bit like I wasn't quite as smart as them. And we had a family meeting, and I was little. I think I was only maybe about, I don't know, 7 or 8. And it was discussing, I can't remember the details, but it was about discussing why a person, I think it was my mom, why he kind of did this dilemma of why she acted or did what she did. That was sort of and I remember raising my hand and being like, oh, that's because she did this, like thinking about the psychology of why she did what she did. And I'm sorry, I can't remember the exact details of it. But what I remember is my dad turned to me and he said, oh, Look at the littlest one. She really knows people.
How
And in
beautiful.
my little mind, when I was like 8, I thought, oh, that is something I could be good at. I might not be
Mm,
the most book smart, but I could really know people. And I didn't think about this at the time. I was getting my master's in marriage and family therapy. And that's when it occurred to me one day. I was walking to classes and I thought, I think that meeting when I was a kid had a
mm,
critical impact and shaped my profession. Because I thought, oh, this is something I can do. I can know human nature. So I
mm,
think, yeah, that had a major kind of impact. But I think this, and I try to instill my own kids. I really think a huge part of making the world better and really thinking, I mean, it was quite extreme in my family. Like you couldn't be shy because to be shy, you weren't thinking about the other person's experience, how it was like
mm.
for you. You're letting your shyness get in the way of the interaction. Now, that's a bit extreme, but in a way, it was really good because it made me get out of my own self conscious and think about how the other person's experience was,
Mm.
and to be curious about their lives. So there was a lot of things in our childhood, and all my siblings are always in professions that they could earn a lot of money. We have a doctor, we had a lawyer, we had nurses and midwives, but my doctor the sister who's a doctor. She worked in Malawi for a long time. My brother was a lawyer, was a public defendant. Uh, you know, they all did professions to help the world and not for monetary gain. So it was beautiful in that way. I feel quite emotional.
I can
Yeah.
understand. I can
Yeah.
understand.
So
And also, I cannot imagine a family of 13, right? And plus the parents 15.
yeah.
So every meal should have been like a feast, right?
Yes.
And a
Yeah.
chaotic feast, maybe. So
Oh my
how
gosh,
was it growing up like that?
crazy. We would go, you would laugh so hard when we went grocery shopping. My dad was a night owl and he would take us shopping in the middle of the night. He would wake us up around midnight. There was about 3 kids. We thought it was exciting. And we would go to this huge grocery store in which we filled 3 trolleys, 3 shopping carts up. And every time we got to the clerks, they would say, oh, this is going to last a long time. And then we would be there next week. You know, the amount of food, we had 2 huge refrigerators. Yeah, it's insane to me now but you had to help each other. You had to work together. You didn't have a choice, in order to function in that big of a family and a system. And obviously, I became a family therapist because I was interested. I was exposed to all these different dynamics. In fact, in a big family, I discovered later that you have like 3 systems in one. Every fifth
Mm.
kid becomes the oldest, which was true in our family. We had sort of 3 different families, and then the larger system. So as a systemic family, it really sort of made sense to me about thinking about systems therapy and thinking about the dynamics and the relationships and the hierarchies and yeah. So
That's
and
so
also yeah,
interesting.
yes,
That, that's
that's my
super interesting. So what else did you learn about your family
well, I
doing
learned a lot
in
of
the therapist
trauma,
eyes?
both. Okay, so the stuff that there was like this weird dichotomy of most amazing stuff and also the most, because in terms of consistency, so what I've learned along the way of stability and consistency, I don't think I got that. I got a weird thing of being the youngest and sort of spoiled and having a lot of people do things for me, older siblings. So I've learned a little bit of a helplessness that I've had to get over. And my first husband was so good at like taking care of everything, which was lovely, but it didn't help me to grow in that. So when I got a divorce at 47, I had to do a lot of adulting that I hadn't done for a long time. And I've made a lot of mistakes, like doing taxes and, it's not stuff I enjoy or anybody enjoys anyways, but I came late to the party of doing that.
Mm.
And also feeling a panic of like, oh my God, can I do that? Because I had so many people to rescue me. So there was almost like this sort of rescue and helplessness. And then there was a bit of neglect as well, because it was inconsistent. So sometimes I might be left in some cribs for longer because, there was a teenager that forgot to get me. And I have one memory. I did EMDR for this memory. I don't know if you know EMDR, which works with trauma with the eyes. Um, I have a memory of being in a crib and like hearing kids running and be like, hello, is somebody going to come get me? And it led to feeling sometimes when people don't prioritize, or if you don't see me, will you forget about me in like my
Mm.
most intimate relationships? So I've had to sort of tease out what's my trauma response and what's in the room in those ways. And then my dad was this large character, and I think he created a lot of moods were a bit like this. So he had some crazy, wonderful idea and thought outside the box and really had us be thinkers. And then he had some, but his moods were, so that left me with a lot of like sort of my nervous system being, doing a lot of work to calm my nervous system in adulthood. So those were the things that I've had to kind of work through. But I don't, I think they're all part of the package, like I feel like it was kind of extreme both ways, like the things I just value the most and the things that weren't so helpful came, which I'm sure a lot of people's childhood feel that way, you know.
Mm. Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
And I love how you talk about it, right? Because there is the lightness and there's the
Mm,
depth and the big awareness of what it has done to you, like growing up like this.
yes.
And I can see the connection as well with your professional life now, like the choice of this path
Oh,
and how you're
completely.
good with people.
And I'll say too, what I really loved about my family, which I feel like I do that with my kids and my relationship, there was a heaviness, but there was a super lightness. There was a
Mm.
lot of fun. We played so many games. We had so much silliness. We danced. We had a room that was just filled with 600 records in which we danced. We took trips around it. We went in a station wagon with 15 of us. We rode around the whole United States, and we were gone for like 6 weeks. There was this adventure. There was a lot of laughter. There was always people you could go to. Um, so it did kind of come with these extremes, but I think my silliness and jokes and humor and lightness also came from it. Yes.
When you're talking about that, I'm just thinking, my God, logistics that it would take to have so many people.
Oh my God. Yeah, we have so many crazy stories that I won't even, we could have our meet for hours. Like even on that trip, we slept in our car every other day in a station wagon with 15 of us. And then we'd sneak into a hotel, tell them that we only had two kids, and then sneak in their other kids. So when I would drive into a hotel, I would have to duck because it would be if they knew there was that many kids in the room. But at the same time, my mom was so good at keeping it probably cleaner than other people. Like she would always clean up after, even though we had so many kids in there. But yeah, we have a lot of funny stories of growing up the way we did.
Yeah, I bet. And what about friends at that time? Or was the friendship needs covered in the family? Did you have friends growing up?
Oh yeah, I did have friends. I didn't always, people did it in different ways in my family. For me, I often wanted to go to their house, my friend's house, because it seemed more, you could never know what was going to happen in my house. So if they came over, it could be clean, it could be a mess. Somebody could be arguing, some people could be doing something wacky. So that unpredictability for me meant that I always wanted to go to their house and hang out. And they had, it seemed like a really nice, house that was like, but my brother's friends came. I think my brother's friends loved that there was 9 girls. Like we had a friend, one of my brothers had a friend, and he used to come over all the time. He only had one brother, and I think he loved that all these girls used to be like just talking to him and giving him attention. And he went on to marry somebody who was one of 12 kids. So I believe, I believe hanging out, my last name is Sommers, at the Sommers house had an influence on who he picked as a partner.
Yes.
So yeah, yeah, we did have friends, and my siblings were quite, I think there was a confidence. Like we didn't always have the nicest clothes but we had this like, we had such a support system at home that when we went to school, we had a level of confidence that I think other kids noticed. So my siblings were quite popular. Also, we had this real like if you saw somebody that was being picked on, you know, my parents said it's your right to protect them, your right to stick up for them. And to be honest, I think as much as like you want to belong as that age, it kind of taught us that belonging, there was a confidence of not belonging, of being outside, being different, you know, sticking up for others. I mean, obviously that's hard because there was that mixed feeling in there. But yeah, there was a level of confidence. I see my siblings that sort of help, you know, confidence is a big thing at that age that draws other people to you.
Absolutely. Yeah. I love that. And I love you mentioned the belonging part, right? And I know that you have moved not wanting to go away from the family and the childhood. And now in adulthood, you've moved from US to UK and now you're in Portugal, right?
Yes, yes.
And how have this geographical shifts shaped your idea of, home, belonging, identity?
Mm. I
What
mean,
have they taught you?
I think kind of linking it to my past, but also like thinking about my present. I think being a slightly on the outside as a child, because we also moved from a different state. I know that sounds like very not much, but we we moved to a small town outside of a bigger town. So we weren't from that where people are like there for generations. And then our dynamics was different too. So I think I got comfortable with being slightly on the outside, which helped to move to different countries because, and I saw change as being exciting and traveling was another, you know, a lot of my older sisters do a lot of traveling. Like that was my dad liked adventures, you know. So to see the world was very important and exciting. I moved to England because my ex-husband was offered a job there. And but I was the one who was like, yes, apply for the job. Like I saw it as I always wanted to go to Europe. I thought Europe was so cool, you know. A lot of Americans fantasize about Europe, Europeans and people fantasize about the US, but so yeah, I thought it was exciting and to live somewhere and learn about different cultures. And I think I'm okay with slightly being on the outside, you know, like yes, it's really community is super important and having friends. I've come to think in life that friendship is the most pure and amazing, the best thing. No, more than anything. Because there's no agendas, there's pure love and connection being just so important. You know, your girlfriends help you through the hardest times in your life. And I've been
Yes.
really blessed in every place I lived to make really good girlfriends, despite my and guy friends too. I shouldn't say that, both. But I think it's so important, and maybe also moving around a lot helps you sort of like adapt and find friends. Lisbon has been amazing for friendships. I never did meetups. I don't know if you found this way, but I never did meetups in other countries. And here, like the meetups are so interesting. You can find somebody, anything that you're interested in. It's been easy to make friends, which is really lovely. And so many interesting people come here too, who also have traveled, lived a similar background. So it's been a beautiful place to connect, you know.
Definitely, definitely agree with that. Lisbon is quite a place where you connect very easily with people, also because there are a lot of travelers
Mhm.
and have the same interests, same, for me, it was
Yeah.
very same position in life in a way, or same stage of life, where you connect quite easily and same interests. So, and I've lived in 3 different countries, and it has
Mhm.
been the easiest actually in Lisbon to connect with people.
Yeah, I feel the same because even the US, although it was the US, I lived in California and then I moved to Maine and then I moved to England. So I've moved around quite a bit and Lisbon has been the easiest to connect and find kind of my people who are kind of on the same kind of I mean, I like people of all different wavelengths, but it's nice to find people that you can really connect with and who get you and you feel like you get them.
Mm. Good. And I'm curious about, since I want to turn it a little bit into
Mm.
the life lessons that you
Mhm.
have learned during your life. What lessons are you still learning?
Well, this kind of is linked. I think this is a lesson that I do a lot of couple work now. And that's really helped me to sort of analyze my place. And so I was married for 20 years, and then I was in a long-term relationship on and off for 5 years after that. And, the great thing about being a therapist is you're always asking yourself, it really makes you grow. And you sort of have to look into yourself and your part, which I really like about it, although it's not always easy, as we know. Um, but one of the things I think about, I look back in different dances I got, like with my ex-husband, I think how my own fears of abandonment, I got into sort of the dynamic of the more he retreated, the more I got demanding and critical, the more I felt emotionally abandoned, the more, I look at my part of that. And I've given him more space and worked on my trauma about abandonment. I think it would have been more helpful. Had I known about attachment like I know now, that would have been helpful in that. I think one of the big lessons is we often think that if we point out somebody's like faults or something they're doing not doing right, they're going to turn around and say, "Oh, thank you for that. I'm going to do something different." You know, really appreciate it. Never works. I say 99.9. It only works if once in a while if somebody goes away, reflects on it, comes back. But in the moment, it creates defensiveness. If people, every time we talk about somebody's behavior in a critical way, you're just creating either defense and attack. We don't do enough of pointing out when the person's doing it right, I think. Or also, like, it's an ironic thing. We think sometimes if we say, "Oh, our needs," like, then the person's going to be able to meet those needs. But sometimes you get, "Oh, my needs," and then the person goes to, "No, what about my needs?" And I would have called two crying babies. But sometimes if we just do our part to show up in the relationship, that we actually get our needs met, you know? So it's like, how do we show up in relationships? How do we do our part? I'm not saying not to, I guess the biggest life lesson too is how do we say what we need? So it's not I think that if we're able to talk in a certain way and open up people's ears, but the problem is so much of conversations get shut down whether people feel defensive or feel like they have to attack back or feel like, and so we rob ourselves of really having good conversations with our loved one, by being curious to really try to understand their point of view, and you can produce something different. But I think that often breaks down by how we communicate. And then people walk away frustrated, but they don't know always how, because of our templates and our parents and observing, they don't know how to talk in a way that you could actually have a good conversation and both feel good about it, even if it's a hard conversation.
Yeah.
So I guess my lessons is the how, learning how to communicate, how to have good boundaries as well, how to talk about those boundaries, how to protect yourself, but also how to love somebody and still love yourself at the same time, which is a
Oh, that's
difficult,
beautiful.
balance. I feel like I've done a lot of analyzing over my place in my most intimate relationships. And I think our couple relationships are the hardest because they're most linked to our childhood. So a lot of these working on your own adverse childhood experience, I think is so vital if you want a healthy relationship, because that gets all stirred up. Like, do I feel seen? Do you have my back? Can I count on you? So it will get stirred up. Maybe not with your friendships, but in the couple relationships.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And when I think that, oh, I've done a lot of work, I've done a lot of healing, and then I'm in a couple relationship and something deeper even comes up. I'm like, when will it end?
I
Feels
feel
like
the
never.
same. I feel the same. I feel like, oh God, haven't I done enough work? But no, that stuff I honestly have come to accept that we'll be working on early childhood experiences the rest of our lives. Like, to think that there's some ending of like, I got to figure it out. I think, and also sometimes we can't change it. Like, we have a nervous system that we bring to adulthood. I think what we can work on is managing it and not having it leak out, or recognizing it or talking about it. But your nervous system, that you've formed in childhood that's why it's not here, not always here.
No.
We have to work on how to how to regulate ourselves, So we can actually see other people's point of view. Because when you're in flight and fight, you lose the ability to see another perspective. So I think you have to learn to regulate yourself, which I'm continue to try to do. And then you can sometimes with couples you can co-regulate as well. But um, yeah,
That would be beautiful if there is the awareness,
if there's
right?
awareness and willingness.
And willingness,
Yeah.
for sure. All this work on yourself and also your background in therapy and everything, how has the perspective shifted when it comes to parenting? And like, how are you creating this space for your children?
Well, I think like all oldest, they sort of are the guinea pig. And so I didn't know what I knew now as well. And I had my own, so I would go to zero because of my childhood experience, kind of 0 to 60 a lot quicker in my own regulation and then become reactive. And that wasn't always helpful to my daughter, who's 18 in June. And so we've had to do our own sort of healing around that. I mean, there was a lot of good things. We were always close, and but there was this reactivity because of my own background. I think with my son, I'm a lot less, I've worked on that a lot, and he's 7 years younger, 7 to 8 years younger. So I think I've been less reactive with him and able to manage my own emotional responses. So I think that's been more helpful. But parenting, one of the things about resilience. So I really have analyzed my own background because and I think this is for a lot of parents, and this has also evolved with me as well. We came from a childhood in which, especially my parents, my dad was born in 1928, my mom was born in 1932. So there's people my age who have grandparents that age. So they were a bit old school in certain ways. But you weren't as close to your parents, but there was definitely a hierarchy. You knew about respect. You wouldn't even think about like skipping school. And now, like, there's a shift. We've gone from a corrective script in which we want to be closer to our kids, which is great, but the hierarchy has gotten a little shifted where kids have become more like that up here, and or sometimes we've learned to overfunction for kids, myself included, and it depends on the child, which doesn't build resiliency. So I always say a little benign neglect is a good thing for resiliency because we don't
Mm.
like see our kids in distress and you want to rush in, but then you rob them of being able to figure it out themselves or handle distress. I think in my own life and as to shape my parenthood, I've really been trying to embrace difficult emotion. So when something goes bad and I feel rejection or disappointed or hurt, I say to myself, yay, good. This is good exposure therapy. I can
Yeah,
handle these emotions. Like I can
beautiful.
handle difficult. And I wish I would have gave that even more to my daughter. I think on some level, like having empathy for what they're feeling, but also them feeling like, because they're going to feel lonely, they're going to feel hurt and disappointed. And I think as a society, we want to run from that versus like, no, I can handle this. It doesn't feel good. I can feel it in my body. I don't have to run from it. I'm going to feel lonely. I'm going to feel disconnected. I'm going to feel hurt and disappointed and rejected, but I don't need to be scared of it. And I think that's my evolution as a person and also affected my parenthood. I did a painting for my son that was like, embrace big feelings. I think it's like not being afraid of it, you know,
What do you do in those moments
with myself or with them.
with yourself to also to regulate yourself?
Well, one, I try
Right.
to have the narrative that this feeling, what is the feeling I'm having? So let's say it's hurt, rejection. And then I try to have narrative that this is good. It lets me feel those feelings that in normal life maybe so I can build up resiliency around it. It's like building a muscle. I see it as so if you're walking up a hill and you're huffing and puffing, your legs are hurting. We have a thing about that in our minds that says, this is a good thing. We're we're having working on our butt muscles, we're working on our lungs that make us go up the hill. We
Mm.
we go to the gym and we say all the time, and yet we don't do that about difficult emotions. We avoid
Mm.
them and we get scared of them. And I think it's like building a muscle. I think it's the same thing. So every time I have a difficult emotion, I think, good, I'm building that muscle. I can handle this. It's building those like what it feels like to be hurt. Now, I also try to focus on the pain because I think we try to, if you have a cut on your arm, you need to attend to it, but we tend to not want to look at it or our shadow side, like our, and I try
Yes.
to put all my energy on focusing on that feeling, that pain, and what it feels like in your body. And the opposite happens. The more you focus on it, the more it releases it. The more you don't run from it, the more, at least the smaller it gets. I think it's our distraction or running from it and trying to, it's the short-term game of trying to avoid, but it creates a bigger problem. So, and we know that emotions ebb and flow. So the idea that, yes, I can feel pain, but I could feel horrible one night and I wake up the next day feeling different. Like
Yeah.
it does pass, and it can be in waves. You can have something horrible happen, grief, right? Grief is horrible in the sense of how, but you have moments where it's tense pain, it goes away, it comes back. But the more you let it sit with it and release for it. In fact, sometimes I think as therapists, there's a lot of stuff on distraction and what you could do to distract. Sometimes I don't find it helpful because
Mm.
in some ways it's still contributing to this idea that I can't handle I have to run from these emotions. I'm not saying that there's not a time and place for distraction, but the biggest thing is how to have a different relationship with difficult emotions, how to sit with it, how to know that they're going to pass and you don't have to run from it. And they're part of the human experience. I really hate the word negative emotions. I really hate that, as if there's positive and negative. No, they're all part of the human experience, you know.
Yeah.
So that's,
Yeah, definitely. I fully agree with that.
yeah. I
Fully
think
agree. It's
that
huge.
was evolving. Definitely that's something over time. And definitely it's changed my how I parent. I think if I can get my kids to really embrace their emotion, I have a nice thing because my ex-husband, he's a really good dad and he really gives them like practical skills and he gives them a lot of love and emotion stuff, but he's definitely more, he's a scientist. And I think we have a good balance. And I always think my role is how to help them to be like emotionally strong and build those muscles.
Mm. Lovely. And when it comes to, in all these years of listening deeply to others and being a therapist, so what have you learned about what humans really need?
And I think this goes with parenthood too. And I was saying that the book I just read really highlighted this, which was How to Know a Person. I think I'm saying it wrong, but it's by David Brooks. But it's how to be seen and how to see others. But I really think, and I read a book around forgiveness by Desmond Tutu recently as well. We don't do enough sitting with people and being able to see them and then to feel it's so healing to be seen. Like half the time you can't fix stuff. People have had all kinds of difficult childhoods. They've had difficult adulthoods. They've had breakups. They've been in more, and there's more been in war. And you can't fix it. And with your kids too, you can't at some age, you can't, if they're being bullied at school, yeah, you should look at how to help them be protective. But if they're having difficult relationships, you can't go to the school and like, yell at the kid that's picking on them. Or like, you need to like be able to being seen and being heard and being connecting to the emotion that they're feeling, I think is the most healing thing. I think what you're doing right now, like I can feel like having those opportunities, like what were critical moments in your life, to listen to how people, they have a story to tell. We all have a story to tell. And it's beautiful to have the platform to tell that story. So I think what you're doing is a beautiful thing. And I think
And I'm so grateful that you're sharing your story as well.
oh, thank you. I think that's the biggest thing and I think what happens with social media, there's a place for social media. There's a place for connecting online. I know that I come from a big family and it would be difficult to keep in touch with like my nieces and nephews who are in their 30s without social media, but it's not a replacement for human connection. Like people have energies, for touch, physical touch is so needed. Um, Raises your serotonin. I think connecting with people and really conversations face to face is a beautiful healing. Community is the most important thing, I think. We are bonding creatures. And although it's messy, I guess that this is where I think it's a combination of building your resiliency around human messiness because humans will let you down. They will disappoint you. But we're bonding creatures and we can't live without them. And it's like, so I think life is like being an ocean where it's the most beautiful thing, but sometimes those ocean waves can come crashing down. And sometimes you have to go to the shore for a little bit to regroup, but you don't want to stay in the shore. You want to go back in the ocean and know that you can swim through big waves, you know?
That's so beautiful because I just finished writing an article actually, freedom versus loneliness, because I know that when I moved to Denmark, I think for the first time I experienced what freedom really means, right? Also freedom of space and personal space and no judgment, even though, of course, people judge here and stuff.
Yeah.
But at the same time, I felt the loneliest actually here,
Mm,
because there's not much of the bonding part, right? As
mm,
you were saying, like the human connection, it's less than when I'm back home in Albania. So
yeah.
that's why I was like, well, I get the freedom, but it's a high price to pay as well,
Yeah.
because you don't have the human connection much.
Which is a hard balance, right? Because the desire for freedom, the desire to sometimes if there's too much connection or too enmeshed, you can feel like you can't be your own person. But then when you're too out here, the loneliness as well.
Yes,
And
extremes are not good.
yeah, they're
That's
not good. But we know that all this has always been a like mental health suffers in isolation, you know,
mm,
without a doubt, the one thing that you can help people who are in even anxiety gets worse. Well, depression gets worse, anxiety gets worse, all in isolation. So increasing people's connection has a major impact on their well-being.
definitely, definitely. So, what are you working on now?
Well, I've been wanting to do more about, I feel like the world has become a very harsh place, you know, like what's happening in the US with Trump, what's happening in Gaza. Um, I feel like I want to move into, I mean, I wouldn't change, I love couple work. I love, when I love that dynamic, but I think I want to get more training and more understanding about trauma and like in war zones and also bridging. There is, as you probably realize in Lisbon, there is a gap between like the expats. There's a lot of healers that come here, but not necessarily. It's kind of outside the larger community. I guess the gap between more access to therapy. So I'm trying to not only in my private practice offer some sliding scales or really reduced scales, but also how to do more community outreach. Whether I need and one is the language barrier, right? Because I don't speak Portuguese fluently, but I think you can do, I used to work for children's social care in the UK. And what I liked about it is we had all these clinicians, all these family therapists and psychologists during an era. Now they don't have that so much, but they were trying a model. And it was giving people who would never have access to therapy. Um, and I really love that. And I want to think more about how to do that in my own community, how to bridge that gap, and we sometimes had to have interpreters, but it makes it slower in therapy. But how do we have bridge? Here there's a lot of immigrants from all around, that don't have access to therapy. I don't want therapy to be for the elite, and it's expensive, as we all know, and there's a reason for the expense. We have, you have continuing ed, there's insurances. People don't always recognize that there is a lot of expenses that come, so it feels like, oh, that's a lot, but there's a reason why it's a lot. And whether I start a charity, whether I want to bridge this gap in my next year or so, because it doesn't sit right for me that it's only access for a certain economic level.
I can hear that brings fulfillment to you and deep meaning for you.
Yes,
It has.
it feels right. It feels like it's the path that I need to go on. Feels good. Um, And then just my own personal development about like I have some knowledge about trauma and but I would like to go deeper in that, and how do you help people who have really been in like horrible like war zones, and I don't feel as skilled to help when it becomes like severe trauma. So I'd like to do more training around that and feel more skilled in that area.
I would love to go on and on today because there's so much, and I feel we've only touched the surface, right? But I would love to ask you, is there anything that we haven't touched or that I haven't asked you so far that you would like to cover right now?
I think you've asked me a lot. Thank you. Some good questions. And I feel like, gosh, I feel like I've said a lot. I feel like I'm going on. And no, I think that's honestly, I think I really kind of the gist of sort of the link between, what's kind of shaped me and my evolution over time as a person and as a parent and as a partner and relationships and what I want my future to look like. I feel like we've done that sort of path, so I appreciate that. I appreciate that. It feels so nice to be able to tell my story. Thank
Well,
you.
thank you so much for having the willingness first to come here and also the courage to share your story. And I can see how open and flexible and loving you are, well, towards self and others as well.
Thank
Thank you.
you. And hurry back to Lisbon.
Thank you for being with us in the Life Lessons Lounge. Remember, every story has its wisdom. Join us next time for more insights and inspiration. Until then, keep learning, keep growing, and keep sharing your own story.